Well, it seems like Jesus went walking down the streets of Hollywood and found himself. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and this is your right angle on the amazing conversion of Kanye West, a man who referred to himself as Jesus for the first entirety of his life, but who seems to have actually found and is actually becoming committed to bringing Christianity to a larger audience. And that, to me, understates the case enormously. Steve, let's start with you. When Kanye West was seen palling around with Donald Trump, I maintained that was the most important thing that had happened in the country since the election of Donald Trump, because I maintain that Kanye West, who has an unimpeachable street cred, gave people permission to like Donald Trump. In other words, if Kanye West likes Donald Trump, Kanye West is maybe the coolest guy out there. He's certainly not an Uncle Tom, so therefore it might be okay. No. And as it turns out, 2 weeks later, they did a survey, and Trump's popularity among black males either doubled or tripled. I can't remember which was significant.
Oh, yeah. It went up from like 6 or 7% to 20% virtually overnight. It was incredible. That's the end
of the Democratic Party if that kind of thing sticks. So I maintain that this is exceedingly important, that social proof, what we call peer pressure, is overwhelming. And for virtually our entire adult lives, if not earlier, the entire idea of Christianity and belief in God has been what stupid, uncool people do. Now here comes Kanye West with perhaps the only ego big enough to swim against this kind of tide. And he's having large religious services. And I maintain he's giving entire millions of Americans and people all around the world, I think he's giving them permission to be Christians.
Yeah, it may sound like you're overselling this, but I don't think so. We talked about Kanye's big service in Wyoming a couple of weeks ago, I think on one of my lightning rounds. And I asked Scott if this guy was going to be the next president of the United States. And I was joking. And I don't think he's going to be the next president of the United States, but he might be in 2032 or 2036. Give this guy some time to really build an audience, a constituency. You never know. And Bill, you said he gives people permission to like Trump. It's more than that. He gives Democrats permission. I just saw a thing from Rasmussen, the polling outfit, in my inbox this morning, that 17% of Democrats. Let me pull this thing up so I don't get this thing wrong.
Sure.
Find this real quick. Rasmussen. Well, I can't find it, but it's some huge number. It's 17% approve of Donald Trump and might actually vote for him. And so when you say this is over for the Democrats, it very well might be. You know, I did my segment this week on millennials who are going whole hog. 70% of them are willing to vote for a socialist, and 30% of them have a favorable view of communism. Well, what are those same kids? I mean, this is Kanye's cohort. These are
That's right.
Young people who are 23 to 38. What are they going to say when they see Kanye West doing this stuff? This is why I say you can't oversell the importance of Kanye's. Do we call it a conversion? Is that the right word?
For the sake of this segment, anyway, I think that's something we can do.
Then that's what we call it. I have no idea where this is going to go. Kanye's music is not my music. I don't care much for the genre, but that doesn't mean that I'm blind to the cultural significance of what is going on here and who his audience is. You know, it's the entertainment industry has been out of sync with America for a long time. There's an old joke back in the studio days of the 1930s that the old Hollywood studios, it was Jewish studios selling Catholic values to Protestant audiences. And this has just been the history of our entertainment industry, being out of sync with just the broad middle of America. But we line up and buy the tickets anyway because the movies were entertaining, and they haven't been, or they've been less entertaining for a long time now. And I'm hoping that Kanye's conversion doesn't just signal a political movement or a movement back to faith, although I hope it is those things. But I would like it to also signal a recentering of the entertainment industry around that broad middle of America that is good and is decent. Or as a lesser musician put it over 30 years ago, it's hip to be square.
That's a funny little segue because I was going to ask you about this, Scott, when we were talking about this on our backstage show. I said Kanye West might even make Christianity cool, and you flinched a little bit.
More than a little bit, because the reality is that Christianity was not made to be cool. Now that said, let me just start off with the positive parts of this. I think the effect of having somebody as prominent as Kanye West embrace Christianity is one that says to a bunch of people who had really not considered that as a possibility in their lives, hey, maybe that's worth taking a look at. They kind of, it's not something that suddenly will persuade them to be Christians, but it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's something that Kanye does? Well, I wear the shoes that Kanye wears, and I have the hoodie that Kanye wears, and I have, and I engage in the kind of singing that Kanye has been doing. And maybe I should check this out for myself. Christianity is not a club that you can just join. It's not just one of those things where you go, hey, the cool people are going there, I think I'll go there too. You can go to church. You can carry a Bible around, you can call yourself a Christian, but there's something that happens at a spiritual level where this Bible says literally the Spirit of God transforms your heart and takes it from a heart of stone into a heart of flesh. And so that's an act of God. Now, God can speak through all kinds of things. In fact, the scriptures say that if the people were not to praise God, the very rocks would cry out. The scriptures say that out of the mouths of infants and babes you have ordained praise. The scriptures even show us an incident where a donkey spoke. God spoke through a donkey in order to stop somebody from doing something. And so certainly, if a donkey can proclaim the glories of God, then Kanye West has a good shot. What I'm hoping for in this whole circumstance, and so far I have seen this, is that Kanye will point the focus to Jesus, not to himself. And when I say I've seen this already, is because the first track on the first album, and I think the name of the album is Jesus is King. It's not Kanye gets Christian. It is Jesus is King. And so that is an unbelievable statement in today's culture for somebody to stand up and say, and I literally mean unbelievable, not just fantastic, not just phenomenal, but it is not believable for somebody to stand up in today's culture and say, Jesus is King. He is the creator of the universe. He is the savior. He is, to declare that is so countercultural that I think it brings people up short. It stops people and they have to deal with it. And so for that alone, I think Kanye deserves a measure of recognition to say, okay, now Kanye, I hope you have surrounded yourself with a bunch of people who are more mature believers than you are, who are able to help to guide you through the inevitable challenges and temptations, especially the worst temptation of all, the temptation of fame, the temptation of self-aggrandizement. I hope you've surrounded yourself with wise counselors, because the battle is going to be more successful as you move forward in your faith with those people. And you run a tremendous risk of causing others to stumble when you do. And we don't want to see that happen when you're trying to point people to Jesus.
Let me see if I can break down why this is so important, folks, because I know we have an older audience generally, and they don't really see how this is terribly significant, but it is. So just stay with me for a second here. The entire idea of self-governance is predicated on a virtuous population. Was it John Adams? Who was it, Scott, who said this government is suitable only to religious people and won't work with any other kind?
It was Adams, yeah.
Basically, the idea is this. If people have virtue inside them, you can leave them alone, because by and large, they're going to do the right thing. And if they don't, they'll regret it, and other good people will bring them to justice. If you abandon the idea of virtue as something internal, then limits on behavior have to be imposed externally, and bad things happen. So this idea of government is predicated on a virtuous people. It's not necessarily predicated on a religious people or a Christian people, but virtue has to be there. That is the requirement. We've seen the last 50 years that the left has succeeded. We talk about the coarsening of society and the lowering of standards and so on. But essentially what's happened is the left has spent 40 or 50 years through entertainment making virtue seem stupid. Being virtuous is only something that ignorant people do, superstitious people do, old people do, hateful people do. They have made virtue by necessity a vice. It's just that simple. The left cannot govern the way they want to govern in a society that is run by virtuous people, because virtuous people can be left alone, and that's not what the left wants. They want to control you. So in order to have that control, virtue has to be eliminated from society. And the way that virtue has been eliminated in front of our own eyes is that it's been mocked and scorned and turned into a vice. And Kanye West, by the way, has been a large purveyor of this particular product. I have to tell you, I had nothing but contempt for this guy. I despised Kanye West in my bones, if for no other reason than the raw, absolute arrogance of the guy. Just drove me nuts. But what's happening here is something very, very important. This is another step. It's not the only step. It's another step showing that you cannot beat the biology out of people. Young males, you can tell them that they're defective girls. You can tell them they're not sharing. You can tell them they're all potential rapists. You can tell them that they're guilty of everything. You can tell them all these things, and they'll bow and scrape, and they'll beg forgiveness, and then they're going to run into their room, and they're going to fire up their computer, and they're going to jump out of airplanes and fire bazookas at Nazis and all the things that make life worth living. You can't beat the biology out of people. Kanye West what he's doing is an indication that you cannot beat the biology of virtue out of people or out of a population. This is an enormously important thing that he's doing, enormously important. And I'll just close by saying this. You never know where your, you never know where the angels are going to come from. You think you know where they're going to come from, but you don't. I'm not saying Kanye West is an angel, but I am saying that transformation that Scott was talking about can only happen if you're at least aware that there is a guy named Jesus Christ. I mean, you kind of need to know that before this can actually happen. And to the degree that Kanye West is opening that aspect of it up, he's performing a tremendous social good. This is the beginning of making virtue, if not cool again, then at least making virtue virtuous again. And that is the beginning of the end of all of this evil nightmare that we've been watching. This is critically important stuff, critically important. So, Kanye, my hat is off to you. I almost said I was wrong about you. I wasn't. But the Kanye West who I used to despise isn't here anymore. And likewise, the Bill Whittle who used to despise things that he didn't understand is largely evaporated as well. I wish you the best of luck with this. And I realize now that in the case of you and Donald Trump, the massive, massive, massive egos that are often so just sort of disquieting and disturbing to most people are a requirement today. For somebody to swim that hard against a stream that's moving that fast. If you're going to swim upstream and face that kind of cultural peer pressure and all of it, you have to have an ego that comes in the size of the box that you put galaxies in. And if that's the cost, then that's the cost, and that's what we'll pay. And good on you, Kanye. And I'm very, very curious to watch this story develop, because if they can make virtue not a vice anymore, just that, they don't have to make it cool, but if they can just make it not a vice anymore, then we will find our way out of these woods and find ourselves in a better country than we ever had been in before. That'll do it for this edition of Right Angle, made possible by the paying members at BillWhittle.com. If you'd like to join us, you certainly can. We'd be happy to see you, and you can do that over at BillWhittle.com and click on the Become a Member button.
There's also a partnership that we have struck up recently with our buddies.
As a matter of fact, there is. I was just about to say that. Believe it or not, I could see Scott on the edge of on the edge of his chair. I've been a big fan of the Patriot Post for quite a long time. I've loved their articles. I think it's a great accumulator of very well written, very intelligent stories. And I especially like their memes. The meme work they do is fantastic. I don't know why the left can't do memes. I guess there's something fundamentally just anti-authoritarian about them. But we've been doing a sort of a cross-promotion with them. They've been running some of our videos, and if you'd like to check out the Patriot Post, you can do so at the link that's located right at the bottom of this video on YouTube. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.